And the damned. And the damned. A large house made of wood, surrounded by trees.
Welcome to Twin Peaks The Gifted
And the damned.
podcast. My name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at FitandTrim. That's FITTENTRIM at FitandTrim on Twitter. And with me, as always, the flesh on top of my T-Mobile electrified doppelganger tree.
Barbecuing just perfectly slowly.
The evolution of my arm. It's Mork. Mork, how you doing?
I'm doing amazing, Bubba. Tweet at me at extraordinary. That's extraordinary with the W in front of the final R.
Now,
On
Mork,
Twitter. Yes, Bubba.
this is going to be our greatest podcast ever. You know why?
No. Why?
Because
Please tell me.
we're not creating the content. This is a feedback
yes.
feedback episode where all
Best ever, most intelligent.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly thought out. Non-rambling, short declarative sentences. This is going to be good. This is what we need more of. This is all we need.
So this entire podcast,
Yes.
it's based around Twin Peaks The Return, parts 1 through 4.
Right.
And it's our double L,
Double L's.
our loyal listeners, providing us with feedback. We may comment a bit, but this is really about you guys, the thoughts you've sent to us, and how we are processing the first 4 hours of Mark Frost and David Lynch's Twin Peaks The Return. Very exciting.
It's very exciting. We appreciate all the thoughts, all the comments, however you send them in. Probably the best way to send them in is at our Facebook page, Double P Podcast at Facebook. You might have heard of Facebook. It's on the internet. So we appreciate all of these. And should we start with the correction?
Yeah, this is very important. When we reviewed parts 3 and 4, I believe I said something along the lines of people have said that there's a picture of Jack Parsons, who was a
Right.
big character in Mark Frost, The Secret History of Twin Peaks. There was a picture of him on the wall in Gordon's office. But I had read that online, but I hadn't checked it. It was
Right.
wrong. Our good friend Joel Baca, who's at Lost in the Movies on Twitter, he pointed out the real truth, in that it's a picture of Kafka, Metamorphosis, on Gordon Cole's wall.
Perfect.
There are even people who say, and I tried to check this before I mentioned it again, so it's very difficult on my TV to see it, but there are even people who say that if you look at the cops going back to Bill Hastings' house right before they check his trunk and find that flesh in there, that if you look through the door, look through one of the windows, that the same picture of Kafka's on the wall at Bill Hastings' house. My TV just wouldn't. It's on the far left-hand side of the screen, so I think it is there.
Okay.
But I can't confirm that. But once again, that's something people are saying on Twitter.
Did you consider just moving the lamp out of the way so you could see the
You know
whole
what?
TV screen?
No, this is a feng shui living room. I can't move the TV out of the
All
way.
right. It's a little odd that you have a light in front of the TV. That doesn't actually make the screen any brighter. But anyway, so real quick, and I don't want to get mired down into this correction, but should we remind people about one of the interesting connections that Jack Parsons worked at JPL during the 50s and 60s, was tied up with, he was investigated by Dougie Milford when he was running around the Western and Eastern United States at the behest of what became Major Briggs's unit
of Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book. And Parsons, towards the end of his life, we won't get into his whole life, but you can check it all out in The Secret History of Twin Peaks by Mark Frost. He lost an arm, and we are now dealing with multiple arms, evolved arms, but it's a fun connection, and I just want to remind folks in case they thought it'd be relevant.
Mork, I love that we are doppelgangers of each other.
Absolutely.
You gave parts 1 and part 2. You ranked them 10 out of 10. You loved them. You were kind of down on 3 and down on 4.
Right.
I was the other way. I was very lukewarm, intrigued, but lukewarm on parts 1 and 2. I liked 3 a bit more, and then I loved 4. So, listeners, we hope that we've got you covered. We hope that one of us is expressing your point of view. Some of our feedback we're going to go over today is really agreeing with you, and they had troubles with parts 3 and 4.
Let's focus on that.
But listeners, we want to be a podcast for everybody. This is a safe space.
Very safe.
When we're occasionally critical, it's just because we know the highs that Twin Peaks has reached so far in these 4 hours and the highs it's reached in the past.
And that's where we want it to stay.
Amen. And so one of the things about this critical look is we did a podcast. If you haven't listened to our pre-season 3, The Return podcast, we did a bunch of podcasts, and one of them we did was a podcast with an essay entitled, "It's Okay to Not Like Fire Walk With Me." And this person on YouTube, Piper, wrote in, and Piper wrote, "I've never liked Fire Walk With Me, but I love Twin Peaks. Thanks for this podcast." So once again, we want everybody to love Fire Walk With Me, but we were kind of looking at it critically, and so we got this feedback from Piper, and so I just want to say thank you.
And you're welcome, Piper, because he's thanking us.
Yeah.
It's a circle of politeness, a circle of manners.
And also, double L's, loyal listeners, that if you hear something you don't agree with, balance us out. Last week, I was talking about how I was having trouble with the pace, what I call double L.
Double L?
Language Lynch. We had a great listener, Jubel, who does his own great podcast entitled Counter
Esperanto
Podcast, where he said he loved the pace. Recently on Twitter, I saw Jubel tweet out, though, he had trouble with Tamara Preston.
Tammy Preston, sure.
Agent Tammy Preston, where I'm the yang to that. I think Tammy Preston's fine. I want to see more of her. So, listeners, give us your feedback.
Yeah, no, that's what we're going to do all day today and tonight and whatever time of day it is when you're listening to this, probably at work or in your new car. And I think a spider just crawled into your car, by the way. Anyway.
Oh, no. A couple of non-feedback things right at the top, though, before we truly dive in. I always refer to television critic Alan Sepinwall.
He's great.
He's one of the people who kind of created the recap and review culture that we live in. When Alan was writing for a newspaper in New Jersey, he was doing recaps of each Sopranos episode, and really kind of everybody owes a debt to him who's doing kind of review and recaps.
He also has a great book about the Sopranos, and he really talks about Twin Peaks as the first of interesting, different, kind of more literary television, and it's called The Revolution Was Televised.
Oh yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah.
So Alan recently tweeted out some thoughts about Twin Peaks, The Return, and he tweeted out, "Twin Peaks' audacity shames all else. But a few other television shows," and he used the example of The Leftovers, "he considers are still more powerful because I care about the people," a.k.a. he cares about the characters.
Sure.
He says, "So far, new Twin Peaks is way more style than substance. Its style just leaves everyone else's in the dust," but he's like, who is a person who feels like a person? Whose fate you care about based on what's happened here in The Return, and not the character's fate because we knew him 25 years ago. And so that was one of the reasons why I asked who your favorite new character was, because I really want to know, and that's one of the minor nagging thoughts I have. Another bit of character-based things, and this is the @Twin Peaks Archive account on Twitter. They put out a poll, and they just put Wally. And then the responses you could give are like, really like, dislike, really dislike. And so theoretically, only Twin Peaks fans follow @Twin Peaks Archive on Twitter.
That would track, yeah, sure.
And of the results, 25% put either they dislike or really dislike Wally.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting about that is I wonder what the results would have been if you could have polled in the fall of 1990 when Season 2 new character Dick Tremaine showed up. Like, we didn't have Twitter polls back then because people did have problems back in the fall of 1990 when Dick Tremaine showed up, because some people are like, oh, I don't like his tone and stuff.
Right.
And so it's interesting that we can kind of get this real feedback from people. Well, could I say that Wally Brando himself is a bit of a question about identity, which we see Cooper suffering through multiple identities. We see kind of a lot of people struggling with identity. And so maybe the theme of this season, and I'm not sure I could honestly say this, but maybe the theme is about personal identity and discovering yourself. And Wally really doesn't seem like himself. He seems like he's trying to be somebody else, obviously.
A little bit, yeah, just a tad.
we got some feedback on Wally himself. So why don't you read this from Aaron?
So this is from Aaron Baxter. I enjoyed episodes 3 and 4 with the lone exception of one Michael Cera. Michael Cera as Marlon Brando may be the most frightening thing that David Lynch has committed to film. Okay, fair enough. I enjoyed it. I think you may have pulled a fast one, Bubba.
What do you mean?
I think this may be a trick question.
Of your 3 favorite new characters?
Three favorite new characters, because we're looking at our results, our hard-hitting data.
Yeah, the double L's you guys wrote in.
Yeah.
And so I've tabulated them all. And perhaps not surprising, the number 1 favorite new character is somebody we like to call Mr. C.
Hey, Mr. C.
And Mork, do you want to say who your favorite new character is?
Mr. C.
Oh, he is number 1 on your list. Do you want to fill us in on the next 2 favorite characters you have?
It's tough. I mean, Sheriff Frank is definitely up there. I mean, he does feel like a real guy.
Right.
And it's nice to see him. Probably, even though I don't think he's going to stick around that much, but I think Bill Hastings, played by Matthew Lillard, I don't know if he's going to be involved much more, but I enjoyed
he was
him.
Good. He was good.
I think he did a good job.
Let me jump in. And so, listeners, you guys sent us so many answers. We kind of had a bunch of people after Mr. C. Mr. C was head and shoulders, the number 1 response we got from people. But tied after that, we had about 5 characters who all got about the same amount of votes. After that, the most popular in a tie was Wally Brando, Dougie Jones Cooper / Mr. Jackpots. The Evolution of the Arm got this many votes, which is great. Bill Hastings, who you just mentioned, and Frank Truman, who you also just mentioned. They were all tied right below Mr. C, Doppelkoop, who was way up there.
Okay, but Dougie Jones, Mr. Jackpots, is not Dougie Jones Coop.
What do you mean by that? Yeah, they mean the guy in the casino was the same guy who went home and played Dougie Jones.
Right, but, okay, I thought the real Dougie Jones is the guy who burned and turned into a little ball and we see a piece of his brain.
Listeners didn't break that down as to, yes, they specifically meant the Dougie guy whose brain burned out. Mork, what do you want me to do? We did have
well, I'm just asking.
Maybe to make it
he was pretty catatonic,
right? To make it a bit easier, we had Evan Richmond on Facebook. He titled him Dougie Coop / Drool Coop.
Drool Coop. Okay.
Like Senior Drool Cup. He called him Drool Coop.
That's awesome.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Any thoughts about the Evolution of the Arm being up there with Wally Brando, Bill Hastings, Frank Truman? That's kind of cool that people really like this.
Sure.
This, what do we call the T-Mobile tree? The T-Mobile electric tree.
Yeah, the Red Room in the Black Lodge, sponsored by T-Mobile.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's great. I think it's fun. I think visually it's interesting. And I'm curious to see if there's going to be further evolution of it. We saw the doppelganger version of it, which was a doppelganger, which certainly makes sense. But I'm curious about if other people, we have the log, obviously,
right,
in terms of people who have kind of been transformed into supposedly inanimate objects. So
sure, we have the log, we have the drawer pull.
With Josie inside.
Right.
So are we going to see more of that? If they're going to do it, I want them to do it more.
Okay, all right. The next group of everybody's favorite characters included Tammy Preston, Janie E. Jones, and Lady Slots Addict.
Slots Addict.
That's pretty good. Lady Slot Addict was actually at the top of my list. If you want to know,
she was the top.
I just love her. So I love anybody who in one scene is shooting the bird and then comes around and is giddy and happy.
Yeah.
I appreciate her story. She obviously looks a little rough. Life's been down on her.
A little bit.
People are kind of saying hello while she's just trying to work the slots, and she flips the bird at security cameras. Everybody's down on her. But suddenly she starts winning, and she's just got the greatest attitude ever.
She's pretty special. I hope her luck stays on her side, but I don't know what's going to happen now that Mr. Jackpots has left the business.
He's got to come back. He's got to come back for her. She needs her man.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll see what I can do.
And then in the very last group, this is characters who really only got 2 votes, but more than just a single vote.
Okay.
In 10th place, we had Tracy, the victim there in the glass box lounge, and Deputy Chad Broxford, who was the jerky deputy who said, well, I'm going to go talk to my pine cone.
Right.
And so people like that kind of almost new Albert feel of a guy who's just not going to put up with the whimsy and the quirkiness of these people in Twin Peaks. So that was it. I want to give a shout out to characters who we haven't mentioned who only did get 1 vote. Katie Bray wrote that she had Bill Hastings as one of her favorite new characters, but as her top favorite new character, she wrote Sonny Jim Jones, the little boy who was so happy and smiling.
And Sonny.
Exactly right. And she wrote, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Nado. Nado was the woman without eyes.
In the wacky room.
In the room, who flipped the switch and then flew off into the stars.
Right. Yeah, as we talked about, I mean, I really did enjoy that part. And she, without being able to perform as other actresses get to perform and other actors get to perform, yeah, she was awesome. She was cool.
I also want to give a shout out to Nathan, who, of his top 3 favorite new characters, he put, as his 3rd favorite new character, he put Gordon Cole.
Well,
he just loves Gordon so much, he wanted to get Gordon in the list.
Gordon is turned over a new leaf, so we'll count him as a new character.
One final bit of non-feedback, and that was, we have our plot check me section here on the podcast. We have somebody called The Only Trout on Twitter who is doing what he calls Twin Peaks detective work.
Is this Los Angeles Angels star outfielder Mike Trout, do you think?
No, I don't think that at all.
All right, well, just wondering.
Do you honestly think that?
No, but it'd be so cool. He's such a good baseball player.
All right. So
it'd be so awesome.
He tweeted out this great thing called Twin Peaks detective work.
He writes, taken linearly, day 4 of season 3 takes place on Saturday. Day 6 is, according to paperwork on the show, 9/22.
So September 22nd.
That means that day 6 was a Monday. September 22nd was a Monday in 2014.
2014 being 25 years past when the show took place in
So for the record,
89.
Season 3 is indeed 25 years and a few months later.
No, pretty cool.
Thank you, Mike Trout.
Thank you. So, all right, now let's get to feedback. Let's dive in. We're going to comment just briefly. Mainly, we want this show to be about your thoughts and your ideas. A great loyal listener, Hurt Few Librarian at Strange Fan 3, and this is all based around the great book and miniseries that we covered here on the Double P Podcast Network entitled Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. They wrote, I'm okay with not hearing about Annie. She was one of my least favorite things about Season 2. So that was one of the questions we asked on the podcast. We were like, is anybody frustrated with the fact we haven't followed up with How's Annie? Here's somebody saying, not
he's okay with it, but she does play a pretty big part.
You would think.
Well, it's fine to not hear about her, but she does play a pretty significant role in Season 2. And a lot of the lovey-dovey stuff and a lot of the romance and the nature studies that she and Coop enjoyed together, and even the Miss Twin Peaks pageant and all that stuff aside, in the Black Lodge with Coop, with Wyndham Earle, with the doppelganger, so she is significant, and I think finding out what happened to her where she is now may be a big part of this, and I'd definitely like to know. But what I would ask Hurt Few Librarian is, does it matter to you whether or not Annie shows up or not? Even if you don't want to hear about her, even if she was one of your least favorite things about Season 2, do you think she has any relevance? I'd be curious to hear that.
That's a good call. All right, why don't you read this next one?
Joe Bear in Boston. While listening to the First Book podcast, right around the 46-55 minute mark, you guys discuss the significance of gold in Twin Peaks, the gold box set, the gold prospectors, the poster from Festival of Disruption, and most importantly, Lynch's quote to, quote, clean the machine and infuse it with gold, unquote. I think we can update this mystery a little bit now that we have seen both a magical gold pearl that apparently contains a Dougie and a series of hanging gold shovels created by the good Dr. Jacoby himself. I do appreciate such languid Lynch moments, by the way. Not only are they relaxing until someone starts screaming, but they also make me ponder what Lynch is trying to get out of them. For example, if this scene had been shorter, I may have never found myself pondering that maybe what he's getting at is that when you're, quote, digging for gold, unquote, it may be the shovel itself, the tool you'll dig with, that is the real treasure. This would tie into Lynch's quote about the alchemy of consciousness. We are the digging shovels who need to look no further than ourselves to find the real gold. I don't know. That's the best I could come up with.
That's pretty damn good.
That's pretty good.
Thank you so much, Joe Bear. Heck yeah.
Okay, so George Glass had a thought. You want to tell everyone what George Glass had to say?
They wrote, I think the statement about holding Doppelganger Coop, a.k.a. Mr. C, for 2 days is that they will have to charge him unless the FBI uses their authority to take a different course. So we were joking in our recap of 3 and 4. We were like, well, wait a minute. They say they can only hold Mr. C for 2 days. They discovered drugs in his trunk.
A machine gun and a dog's paw.
So, George, I believe that your thought has to be correct.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Now let's go to one of our favorite countries in the entire world, Sweden. Gustav Rosengren says, the dark spirit in the jail cell. It's the jumping man spirit from the Black Lodge without his white mask. Think about it for some time. The jumping man will make a comeback in season 3.
Well, Gustav, I love that thought. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I love that you're thinking like that because in an Entertainment Weekly interview, Lynch said to, keep watching that guy, meaning keep watching. So I don't think we've seen the last of that creepy guy who was in the jail cell and then his head floated up.
Yeah, I want to see him again, just not in the same room as me.
Cool. We'll send him away.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Greg Fifield writes, good old Greg, who comments a lot. We really appreciate you spending so much time with us. Great podcast this week, gentlemen. Well, you're half right. Out of all that info, only really 2 things I feel you missed. 1, Michael Cera was really only there to answer the question of who was the father, Dick or Andy, and based on his performance, they made it obvious Dick was the father.
Well, let's pause for a second. Do you agree with that
No.
Wally Brando is definitely the son of Dick Tremaine? I could kind of see it. I could kind of see that.
I could definitely see it, but for me, I don't know what was there. It didn't make it obvious to me.
Okay. Well, I would say that Wally Brando is putting on an air. Mm-hmm. And one thing I would definitely say is Andy never feels like he puts on an air, where Dick Tremaine did. Now, his personality really a genetic gift to your children?
Right.
I don't know, but I could see it, Greg.
Well, I always felt deep down Dick Tremaine was a pretty old-fashioned, authentic kind of guy.
Oh.
Okay. Greg also writes, 2, a major thing to me was the revelations about Gordon Cole. Denise meeting with Gordon gave us a small insight into Gordon having a history of less than pure actions towards younger female agents. A first chink in the armor, perhaps. The other revelation that all of this time Gordon can hear when he chooses to is huge. It speaks volumes about his character that he chooses to make people yell when he could turn up his hearing aid to meet them at least a little. I think that last part is interesting and it is fun. I don't know if it's something that has necessarily been happening this entire time.
Yeah, I think it's a new hearing aid that allows him to do it. I don't think back 25 years ago
he was using a transistor radio, basically.
Yeah.
You know, you could always hear the Mets playing in the background when they shot the show. So in terms of the revelations, I don't know. It's interesting. And in terms of the chink in the armor, here's where we start talking about being on the threshold and a lot of what Hawk has told us about going into the Black Lodge with an impure heart. I get that, but that to me, are we raising Cole up to Coop's level in terms of having to be pure of heart? I'm not sure we really need that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a small chance that the scene was really just a wink and a nod about Gordon Cole making out with Shelley back in season 2 of the original series. I don't know. We'll definitely keep watching, though, Greg. Wonderful feedback everybody. Incredible feedback. We love it so much. Let me read this one, and I hope I pronounce his name correctly. It's Hunks Lamb, you believe the name is there, Mork?
Sounds right.
They write, can I just have a little rant about Tammy Preston?
Go for it.
I do not think she is a convincing FBI agent. She's too poised and too catwalky. Not the gait and posture of a special agent at all. Mm-hmm. I hope she gets some decent scenes or dialogue to prove herself otherwise, because she comes over as very prolific in the footnotes of Secret History of Twin Peaks. But I don't think it matches much from what I've seen of on-screen Tamara. But perhaps I'm just being a bit premature. Ooh. That's another person who's having trouble with Tamara Preston. Did you have trouble? I mentioned that I didn't. Have you had trouble?
I 100% agree with that, yeah.
Whoa.
Sure, because also there is sort of a question mark of, well, when was this dossier shared with Tammy? Because as of right now, Gordon and Tammy are together, going to Eastern and or Western Washington State.
No, they're going to Eastern or Western South Dakota.
Well, eventually they'll get there.
Oh, geesh. Don't assume. You get in trouble if you assume.
Oh, man. Okay, so, but I do agree with that, yeah. I mean, she should have, she hasn't been as developed as what we need, and so this is what, Seppenwall and I think a lot of people are responding to, where, okay, we met this person, but we don't really know why we're watching them. They're just sort of there. So, at this point, yeah.
I think she'll do more. I think she'll do more. Yeah, I hope so. I want to see more.
For sure. Jeff T. Johnson. I wonder if the knock at the door of the Eyeless Lady's tin capsule is Hawk.
Huh. Now that is a good call.
Pretty cool. And the capsule is a way station between the Red Room and Earth. Could be. And is there a connection between Dougie's tingling arm and Mike's arm tree? That Motorola tree does look kind of tingly. It's Motorola, sponsored by T-Mobile. Jeff. Finally, a word on whatever Dr. Jacoby is up to. One of my favorite points from the Gifted
and the Damned
episode on the first 2 return episodes was that the double L, languid lynch pacing, adjust the tempo of our attention. By the time we revisit Dr. Jacoby and his shovels, that would be a really cool name of a band, by the way.
Dr. J and his shovels.
We're better attuned to his patience. And still, that drawn-out, deliberate pacing, along with the mystery of the golden shovels, feels like foreboding to this double L.
Ooh, languid Lynchian. I love that. Jeff goes on and he says, he's not sure about Betty's car. Now, this goes to Bill Hastings, secretary that we heard was wired. Jeff writes, though, but Mr. C seems to have killed Jack for wiring C's car, meaning his own car. Makes sense of that bizarre face massage, a parting gift. Whoa.
Yeah.
And then Jeff ends with, anybody notice or seen discussion of the Black Lodge arm tree scene right after we leave Mr. C and Chantel in room 7 of episode 2, right there at the end. Specifically, when the tree says 253, according to the subtitles, but out loud it sure does sound like 257.
Absolutely.
I've not traced the numbers through the rest of the episodes, but I'm working on it. Any leads or thoughts are appreciated. So, let me just jump in here, Jeff, and say that in the next episode, when the switch between Mr. C. Doppelcooper and Good Cooper was supposed to happen, it was happening at 2:53 on the time clock. Like many people were looking at their watch, and it was 2:53 when theoretically that switch should have happened.
Right.
But then Coop ended up in good old Dougie Jones. The one thing I'll say, though, is, Jeff, you're absolutely right. If you listen to it, it sounds like in backwards talk, admittedly, but it sounds like it's saying 257. So,
Yeah, I thought that too, and there is something I want to talk about, but I want to wait until we get through the comments to bring it up. So let's just keep cruising. Average White Dan, at Mr. Dan Larkin on Twitter, writes, in the old series, we had a bunch of seedy stuff simmering beneath the veneer of a wholesome small town. Has the veneer returned? Albert and Gordon going to get Ronette to take a look at Mr. C?
Ooh, well, the last part is about the cliffhanger. At the end of episode 4.
Right.
Albert says, I know where she drinks. So here at Mr. Dan Larkin is suggesting it could be Ronette. Now, I tend not to think that would be it, since we just saw Ronette, or the actress who played Ronette, in the way station space capsule there. Who do you think, Mork, are Albert and Gordon going to see?
Well, my favorite theory, I don't know if I agree with it, but my favorite theory is Diane.
I've heard a lot of people guess that.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting about it is neither Gordon nor Albert really believe that Mr. C is Coop. So I don't know why they really need someone else to verify it, but I'm certainly open to meeting whoever it is.
Now, what about Average White Dan's first bit of his feedback, where he was talking about seedy stuff underneath the veneer?
Right.
And is it now that it's been 25 years later and the veneer has come back and people aren't seeing the true wickedness there in the Black Lodge, Glastonbury Grove part? What do you think?
Well, it's hard to say because we really haven't spent too much time in Twin Peaks. So we spent a lot of time in the bar, and we spent some time with Dr. Jacoby and the sheriff's station. So we've spent a little bit of time there, but there hasn't really been anything presented to us. But that's kind of what we're waiting for, is what is going... I mean, we don't really know what's driving the show yet. So we got to find out. I don't know if, because we explored how much was going on, was simmering underneath the veneer in seasons 1 and 2, in Fire Walk with Me. I don't know if it needs to go back. It's been revealed, but yeah, we'll see. I think we'll know for sure, Average White Dan, when we get back to Twin Peaks and spend some time there for real.
Thank you so much for this feedback. This next one, Mork, it's from a great Double L loyal listener. In fact, it's somebody I like to call Double M.
Double M?
Marvelous Matt LeBlanc.
Oh, yeah. He is fantastic. Why don't you read this one, Bubba?
I'm not going to read that first sentence.
No,
you have to read it.
Why don't you read it, Bubba?
Oh, this hurts me to say it, but Matt writes, thank you, Mork.
The circle is broken.
Everyone is going on about how they loved episode 4 and it's their favorite, and it's driving me insane because I also felt like you did, Mork, that it was the worst one so far. I would describe previous episodes as being great with some annoying parts. And then Matt writes that he was talking about the woman talking to the police about the body drove him insane. That's the woman looking for the key, I assume. But to Matt, episode 4 was actually all annoying with some really good parts. Watching Cooper walk around confused for seemingly 3/4 of the episode is not what I wanted. I want Cooper to be Cooper, not, oh, look, he doesn't know he's winning money. Oh, look, now he doesn't know how to pee. Oh, look, he's wearing a tie on his head.
Matt goes on. That being said, it makes sense? ? Quote, but it is said if you confront the Black Lodge, and this is Hawk talking many years ago, it is said if you confront the Black Lodge with imperfect courage, it will utterly annihilate your soul. That makes sense, right? There has to be a reason to have this much stumbling around. Second, it is safe to assume that evil Coop saw Briggs and killed him the next day. Thus, the ending, Mayday in Secret History of Twin Peaks, and Bobby saying Cooper was the last one to see the Major alive and that he died in the office fire the next day. That being said, can one assume Mr. C's briefcase that can talk to Philip and access FBA files, etc., was something Briggs and Milford were working on prior to their deaths that Mr. C took before fleeing town, never to be seen again?
Oh, now I love
right, so there's a lot to chew on here.
Yeah, but I love this last point about, well, how did Mr. C end up with this top secret briefcase? Now, the briefcase, people have looked at it. It is running... What's the Windows version of an iPad called?
Surface.
Yeah, apparently it is running a Windows Surface is what they saw. And so they wouldn't have had that when theoretically Mr. C set the fire that hurt and killed Major Briggs.
Yeah, one would think. We don't really know what the FBI has in their secret lab. So it's hard to say. And for me, it reminds me more of what it's sort of an updated version of what Wyndham Earle was lugging around.
Oh, yeah.
Much more than something that Briggs and Milford were working on. They seem to be working on, giant telescopes, giant micro, that's what they seem to be working on more than small, these, like a consumer grade technology. But yeah, it's connecting to Philip Jeffries is huge, and just because it was such a tiny moment, but it could have a big effect on all of these things. But this brings up something that I just want to touch on, and
sure.
It's part of let's just call it a concern I have through the first 4 episodes, where a lot of what is happening in the lodge and how it's happening, to me, it doesn't really matter. I want it to be satisfying. I want it to be meaningful. I want these characters to go to places that we haven't seen before and react to things in different, unexpected ways, in satisfying ways. But I'm not concerned about learning the exact mechanics of the lodge and how all of this is being done. I think that to a certain extent, it can take us away from what is... I think to a certain extent it distracts from the more spiritual side of the show. These things are happening in supernatural ways. That's good enough for me. As long as we're following the rules that they lay out, that's good enough for me. I don't need to know exactly how all of these things work. And I think we might be getting into... The show might be getting a little bit too much into the minutia for it to be satisfying to me.
Well, that breaks my heart, Mork, because I've spent the last several days writing a detailed explanation of how the wall socket in the space capsule transmits your soul via electricity, but not your shoes. So, forget this, okay? Thanks, all my work.
Bubba, I just have one thing to say.
What?
RTFM.
I want to go back to Matt's first point about him having trouble with episode 4.
Okay.
Matt, you're the yin to my yang. I'm glad that I liked it, and that I'm glad that I thought it was my favorite episode. And I have mentioned about how some scenes I weren't laughing at. I did laugh occasionally at Mr. Jackpot's stumble through the casino. I did laugh at various moments in episode 4. And so I've seen many people write that love the episode, and they talk about how they love it, and yet still call it glacially paced. And so... in that one instance, I can understand how people can love it and it be glacially paced, because I did like that general idea. And even though I keep wanting more of the Twin Peaks score that I'm used to, the take 5 that played as Dougie Jones had his breakfast helped fill in some of that kind of slow pace for me.
Right.
But everybody, once again, this is a safe space for everybody. We want to hear all your thoughts.
Sure.
Give them to us.
Hit us. Hit us hard. Oh, Bubba, would you also like to read the first sentence of Benji Messer's next comment here?
I will read it. Benji, another great listener. Thank you so much. Benji's first sentence is, I agree with Mork.
That's all we really need to
and
hear.
Matt LeBlanc.
I mean, he goes on a bit, but those are the key points there.
No. Read Benji. What's he say?
All right. He loved the first 3 episodes and got pretty bored with episode 4, watching Coop walk around confused. I imagine his slowness has something to do with time moving differently in the lodge. I bet the lodge is true language Lynch, and he's used to having to watching somebody carefully for an hour or two before they move or say something, so he's still adjusting to the pace of the real world. I would rather have spent more time with regular folks while he recovered, though. Also, let's assume that Cooper and Mr. C have the same genetic code, and it's just expressed differently. And let's assume that Dougie Jones was a doppelganger created by Mr. C out of the ring and a little metal ball and a saliva sample and some magic. So his DNA is also identical. So genetically, Sonny Jim has now lost his dad, but he could get information about any hereditary diseases in his family from either Cooper or Mr. C. Though I don't know how much Mr. C knows about it. Do you think, if all of us have doppelgangers, that all of our doppelgangers are created in the Black Lodge when we're born, a la Bizarro World?
Benji, for any doppelganger's benefit, I just pray they're not mine. I'm like, I really don't want anybody to be stuck with this DNA, with this face, with this voice. So I hope there's not a Doppel Bubba out there.
Doppel Bubba would be pretty amazing and would also have a cool Prius like you.
But one thing that I love about Benji, about your feedback, is you took a scene that I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. Little Sonny Jim giving the thumbs up to Dougie Coop, and Coop giving the thumbs up back. Mm-hmm. And you've made that real sad. Because Sonny Jim has lost a dad. That's kind of sad thought, Benji.
It is sad, but Sonny Jim doesn't know, so who cares? It's totally fine.
Heartless Mork. Heartless.
Look, he's got Naomi Watts as a mom and a fun, slobbering, drooling Coop as a dad.
Well, let me tell you something.
Life is good.
Let me tell you something. If his mom is inattentive to him as she is to her husband, Sonny Jim's on his own.
Sonny Jim is going to be just fine. I think we have an heir to... We could also call him Good Kid James. So
Good kid, Sonny
Jim. Good kid. Evan Albert Richmond writes, on the Doug Performs, people have been speculating that the numbers in the room with the woman with no eyes, Nido, and the room with American Girl, Phoebe Augustine's character, also Rena Pulaski, have to do with time. That instead of coming out in 2015, the Nido character sacrificed herself so Cooper could come out at 2003. Thus, 15 turns to 3. Also, at the casino, when Dougie Coop gets changed from the female attendant, she has a ring that looks very similar to the Owl Cave ring.
We need to look for that.
We definitely do. Could there be more than one? Last thing I thought was interesting was that in NYC with the glass box, there was a bonsai tree on the table next to the sofa. Perhaps Earl is our secret billionaire, Wyndham Earl. Or wait, he's dead.
Oh, good feedback, Evan.
That's great.
I now immediately want to go to the TV and see.
We got to move that lamp, though.
If this waitress is wearing the Owl Cave ring. How many rings are there?
Yeah.
I mean, how big? Well, that was a pretty big Formica table. They could have made a bunch of these rings, these evil spirits above the convenience store.
They could have made a bunch of rings. As far as we know, though, there was a nurse wearing it, and then we saw...
In the missing pieces of Fire Walk with Me, you're right. It ended with the nurse grabbing the Owl Cave ring.
But then, I also believe that we saw Dougie Jones wearing it, too.
That's true.
So, multiple rings. Are they serialized somehow? Do they have those little trackers on them? Do we know if they're authentic or not? I don't know. We need to get into
this. One of a kind, one of only 50 made Owl Cave rings.
Well, the ring also has a doppelganger, apparently. So, it's totally fine.
What do you think, Mork? Is it possible, since we're jumping around in time so much, that the Dougie Jones Coop section takes place back in 2003? I didn't actually pay attention to the cars to see if they were modern cars or cars that could be 15 years old. But
that's a great point. I hadn't really thought of it. I like the idea of it, but if it means that Mr. C and Drooling Coop aren't going to go head to head, I'll be a little disappointed because they're in different time zones.
Okay. Well, they could always meet back up in the lodge.
Yeah, they could. But that place, it's got all those curtains. It's easy to get lost in there.
If Coop ever gets back to himself, the first thing he's going to do when he sees Mr. C is going to be like, what did you do to my hair? Where are all my nice suits? Look at that crap you're wearing.
Mr. C's wardrobe does leave a little bit to be desired, but God bless him.
Let's get to some theories people sent us. This is where we're going to go.
This is some cool stuff here.
Get
Here we go.
Deep in the woods.
All right. So Dougie, again, maybe, thinks that good Cooper drinking the coffee and spitting it out seems to me like Cooper is starting to come back. I saw that as him recognizing that he loves coffee.
And following up that comment, a person whose username was enter a name here wrote that he hasn't had a good cup of coffee in 25 years. Maybe that's all he needed. Oh, that would be great. And we all hope, since some of our listeners didn't enjoy part 4, where Dougie Coop was stumbling around, hopefully that this coffee will wake up the old Coop.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mike Phillips writes, I understand your take on the doppelganger tree sending Coop to non-existence, but what if the tree meant that Coop himself was non-existent? Possible? I think it's very possible. I mean, I think by being in the non-existent place that you are non-existent. So, yeah, but somehow he was able to sneak through and get to either 2003 or 2014. We don't really know yet. He's able to be back in the physical world.
What if the guy having the affair with Jade, Dougie Jones, we were told that he was made for a purpose. Is there any chance that our original Cooper that we saw driving into Twin Peaks, is there any chance that he was also made for a purpose? And he is non-existent, like Mike Phillips is getting at here. Woo, that would depress me.
It depends on it depends on who's making them and why. I mean, that could be really, really cool. I don't know. That could explain a lot in terms of a lot of what we saw and discussed in Secret History Twin Peaks and certain characters not lining up. It's a logical extension that, well, who else has been made up for some purpose that we don't know? I think that's really an interesting idea, and it could be really cool. How that happens, though, it doesn't really bother me. I just want to see... I want to see more of these things kind of transitioning and coming together. They haven't really coalesced yet. I'm looking forward to it, but we got to get there.
All right, so now we're going to get into a bunch of people talking about the same general idea, and I call it the how much Cooper is there in the world thread. So the first part starts off kind of unrelated to the others, and the first part does start off with Hunks Lamb, who we just mentioned ago. And Hunks wrote, I had a theory bubbling away in my brain about this, how much Cooper there is. And he says that the Coops are 2 parts of the soul because it was annihilated as a result of going into the Black Lodge. Like he panicked, fumbled, and then lost the ball. And so the doppelgangers are actually manifestations of the ripped apart soul of Coop. Hawk's explanation of the dweller on the threshold has come back to me a lot when I'm trying to figure this out. And then that leads into a Twitter thread by many of our friends, and it started from our good friend Necropolitan Comic.
Episodes 3 and 4 theory. Blank Coop only has half of good Coop's psyche. The rest went to Mr. C. Thumbs up.
Our good buddy Joel responded to that, and he wrote, alternatively, and he put also in parentheses, unlikely. What if they treat Cooper so well, insist on paying him, invite him back to the Silver Mustang, no accusations, is because they think he's Mr. C.
All right.
Ooh, I like that.
That's pretty cool. I dig that as well. Diane at Diane Podcast.
Yeah, these guys do their great podcast too. What'd they write?
They write, maybe Mr. Jackpots and Mr. C are one and the same.
One and the same.
Do not know how this would work. Just brain bending. Well, I mean, it certainly, if he went back to 2003, then he'd have some time to A, go shopping for those cool shirts.
And grow his hair out.
And B, grow his hair out. So that could be really cool. We don't know.
And then our good friends at the Bickering Peaks podcast, they added to the thread, they wrote, maybe there's a finite amount of Coopness that exists. And now that they both exist in the world, they have to share that essence. And then they wrote, that sounds so insane.
Well, I think it's a cool idea, and I think it's a fun theory. It doesn't really work for me just because Mr. C is not missing anything on his fastball. He can knock people out with one punch. He's killing people left and right. He's got a crazy tape recorder that does evil things. He's not missing anything. Where Drooling Coop is, if he's missing half his brain, Mr. C's not missing anything at all.
Well, Mr. C is missing anything of light, anything positive, anything hopeful, love, happiness. You would say he's missing all those things.
Bubba, I'm crying. He is. Yes, he is. But if that's all that Dougie is, or that's all that Mr. Jackpots is, then why can't he function as well? I mean, unless you're saying that love and light are stupid and
are you calling Dougie Coop Jones stupid, Mork?
No, I'm calling love stupid.
Oh, Jesus. Right. Somebody's got to be the yin to that yang here. The stone-hearted.
That's exactly right. No, but why would if Good Coop, if Mr. Jackpots has it, I mean, he has love and light and all that, great, but he would still be able to function. He would still be able to wander around.
Well, he's a newborn with love.
All right,
We're
fair.
all born innocent. Boy, now I'm really pulling some stuff out of it.
Oh, man, this is getting a little teary-eyed. Okay.
So, Mork, now we're going to end
Bubba.
this feedback podcast with something I really love. Listeners, if you didn't listen to our pre-Twin Peaks The Return podcast, I encourage you to go back because we did a series of segments on our own real-life Twin Peaks celebrity encounters. There were like a couple of good stories. Most of them were kind of lame stories.
I don't think they were any good stories.
There might have been one or two good stories.
No.
And so now we have a listener, a great Double L, loyal listener, who wanted to get in on the act and share his own real-life Twin Peaks celebrity encounter.
Matthias Plunkett writes, back in 2001, there was a community called Cybertown, which was a bit like Second Life. People could log into sites written in VRML, virtual reality markup language, get themselves an avatar, explore 3D content, and chat with other users. Being the Twin Peaks fan I am, I made several Twin Peaks 3D environments, including Glastonbury Grove, the Red Room, the room above the convenience store. These 3D places were quite popular with users of an old site called the Twin Peaks Gazette, run by a guy called Jordan. Anyway, in the spirit of authenticity, I tried to map faces of characters, including Little Mike, onto bots that I left in the environments. Mike was a bit of a problem model that I couldn't get right as I didn't at the time have access to a good picture of his face. I wrote to him asking for a picture that I could use on my Red Room simulation.
So he wrote to the actor Michael J. Anderson. This is great.
Yeah, who played the arm. Absolutely. I was surprised when he wrote back saying that he loved the project and would probably be able to help. A week or so passed without any communication after that. Then I got this lengthy and somewhat terse mail telling me it wasn't going to happen. That's how I like to write my letters, lengthy and terse. I would not get a photo of his face because he was concerned that if the model was a likeness of him, it would potentially impact on his future earnings. What if the model got some kind of acting work? What then? Would Mike see any money from its earnings? These were questions that he asked before concluding that I couldn't have a picture of his face on the basis that he didn't want to contribute towards a VR ML clone actor. It was quite surreal. These models were so low on the polygon count, think Tomb Raider 1, and my work was so obviously a fan homage with little commercial scope, I was quite bemused. Upon reflection, had I access to a time machine, I would have just made a lightning tree with a talking blot of a head, sponsored by T-Mobile. I never forgot the surreal nature of the sudden cold turn that I got. That's it. That's the encounter. I think it's a pretty great encounter.
That is equal and better than almost probably every story we told in our real life Twin Peaks celebrity encounters.
Yeah, we didn't get a lengthy or a terse email from anybody that we dealt with. That's pretty cool.
Yet.
Well,
there's still time.
We're working on it. What strikes me about this email is that episodes 1 through 4 of season 3 could actually be this plot played out. There's virtual reality. There's 2 different versions of people. There's avatars. You get to explore 3D content and chat with other users. So, Mr. Jackpots was chatting with another user, like the Addicted Slots lady. She's just logging in from somewhere else. So that might be what we're watching here is just a giant simulation in Twin Peaks and other assorted areas.
We should have said the word spoiler alert before we read this real-life Twin Peaks celebrity encounter. Love it.
The show is based on this letter. That's fantastic.
Listeners, if you have any real-life Twin Peaks celebrity encounters, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/double P podcast. That's the word double, the single letter P, the word podcast, plural, podcast, facebook.com/double P podcast. Let us know. Everybody.
We'll assume that they're all true.
Yeah, that is true.
We will
assume.
Yes, we will vouch for their veracity.
Now, Mork, are you going to be okay that coming in just a couple of days on Sunday, we just get 1 hour, part 5. So far, we've been spoiled. We've been getting 2 hours the first 2 weekends. But for the next several weeks, it's just 1 hour of Twin Peaks. Oh, it's going to be tough.
We have 14 weeks of this. I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. But I'm still looking forward to it, so that's all that counts.
Thanks once again for listening to Twin Peaks The Gifted
and The Damned
podcast. We're going to be up with new podcasts the night of every new Twin Peaks episode. You can find me, Bubba, on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM at Fit and Trim on Twitter.
And Mork is at Extraordinary. That's extraordinary with the W in front of the final R.
And until next time, non-existent.